I'm a business school academic, and when I go to dinner parties these days, I get strange reactions from people. And I say, when people ask me, what do you do? And I say, I teach at a business school. At first, it's a bit blank. Not necessarily. These parties don't always involve MBA students, I must say. But at first, it's a little blank. Or people say, they make associations about, maybe I'm trying to create these large businesses that might prey on people or something like that. And then I say, I teach entrepreneurship. I work with entrepreneurs. I study entrepreneurs. And then you can see their eyes brighten up. Suddenly I'm on their side. Suddenly it's an exciting thing to be doing. Now, in fact, if you think of the definition of entrepreneurship, the good folks at the Oxford Dictionary define it this way: a person who sets up a business or businesses taking on financial risks in the hope of profit. There's some excitement right there. So who's setting something up? You're creating something, right? Taking on risks, there's a certain heroism involved in taking on risks. And there is this lure of prosperity, of profits in the future. In fact, if you think about the entrepreneur, you think of someone with a hoodie, creating something, who knows, that'll change our world. And this is an aspiration not just for future entrepreneurs. I've been with rather serious government officials who say, I was once at an African country where this minister came up to me, and when he found out I was a professor of entrepreneurship, he says, can you help design a curriculum for us for the entire high school system of our country? Because we want to be a nation of entrepreneurs. Our young people should be create a nation of entrepreneurs, should be filled with entrepreneurs all around here. I was once at a hotel room, late at night it was, flipping through channels, and lo and behold, there was the Welsh National Assembly, the Welsh Parliament. Riveting stuff was on. And what was being discussed at the Welsh National Assembly was these new results that showed that young people in Wales, 18 to 24-year-olds in Wales, had chosen careers in entrepreneurship at record rates, startups at record rates. All good stuff, right? Except whenever I hear this, my heart sinks. Do you know what the most entrepreneurial countries in the world are? What would you guess? Think of the countries you have in mind. Sweden, United States, yeah. Israel, startup nation, Israel. Do you know, in the OECD country of list of rich countries, the United States is number 2 from the bottom, yeah, in self-employed, percentage self-employed in the country. Between 6 and 7%, depending on which you hear. The only other country that's ahead of the United States is Luxembourg. Israel, startup nation, low teens is the percentage self-employed. Greece, 35, higher percent. The most entrepreneurial, at least as defined by self-employment, and this definition, in Western Europe is Greece, Italy, Spain. And indeed, going wider beyond Europe, Zimbabwe, 75% of the population is engaged in their own business. Tanzania, Uganda, Angola, these are some of the leading entrepreneurial countries, hotspots in the world. In fact, even if you change the definition and say, what I really mean is not just owning and operating a business that's been that way for a long time. Startups, same story. The most entrepreneurial, as in defined by startups created in the last 3 years, also tend to be the poorest countries in the world. In fact, the life of the entrepreneur is far from glamorous. Most entrepreneurs in much of the world barely eke out a living. My colleagues and I have been studying micro-entrepreneurs, small business owners around the world. And what you realize is that these small business owners represent the most common type of business on earth, and they face debilitating constraints that are almost seem hopeless. This horrible image is that of a fruit and vegetable seller in Tunisia named Mohamed Bouazizi, whose frustration at his inability to eke out a living and his daily humiliations every day caused him to set himself on fire. And many argue that one horrible symbolic action by that one individual created the flames that we see today in the Arab world. That one symbolic event. We've been studying entrepreneurs in Egypt, in a slum in Egypt, in Ghana, in South Africa, in India, and other places. Yeah, in fact, I just came back from India, I must say, and one is struck by just the links between entrepreneurship and prosperity or lack thereof. So in my hometown, I'm from southern India. I was recently there. In my hometown, a fair bit of construction happening. So cars come to a stop, and wherever these cars come to a stop, there's a traffic jam. A whole bunch of entrepreneurs come by a window, yeah? And you know what? At this one junction this time, a couple of months ago, I was in my hometown, all of the entrepreneurs were selling one thing, it seemed like, selfie sticks. That very much fits that definition, something new. Certainly the new business, taking risks, hope for profit. But the lives of these entrepreneurs are far from easy and should not be glamorized. In fact, they face such incredible constraints on very, very simple things, like access to information. So in our study in Cairo, we asked, it's focused on grocery store owners in this slum in Cairo, 2 square kilometers. And we asked them, how much exposure have you had, essentially? It was a way of asking them the level of exposure to the outside world. 1/3 of those in this slum had never been outside the slum. We've been looking at access to finance in places around the world. Small amounts of money. They don't have access to it. Basic skills of the kinds that business school students might take for granted are lacking. In fact, we have a study in South Africa where we look at the impact of business skills on entrepreneurship and outcomes of entrepreneurship. And what we find is that the good news is that business skills seem to work. In fact, here's how we do that. It's a randomized controlled trial. So 1/3 of the 800-odd entrepreneurs in this series of township locations in Cape Town get training for 10 weeks in marketing and sales. Once a week for 10 weeks, half a day a week. 1/3 get training in finance and accounting. And 1/3, because we had capacity constraints, we could only serve so many, we said, we can't offer the training to you now, but we promised to offer it to you in 18 months, which we did. But in the meantime, we'd like to track how you do. The good news is, business skills seem to work. The striking thing, though, is in the exceptions. Those who manage to go from 1 employee to 2 and make a little more money. 2, those who did remarkably well. So there's one, I remember the pilot we did, there was this one individual, at least in the spreadsheet row I was looking at, and that individual represented that row, all the data on him, who seemed to have gone from 0 employees to 54 employees within the space of 6 months. So I said, is this some sort of data coding error? Maybe it was meant to be 5 and someone said 54, or 4 and instead of 54. So we called him. And we said, so just wanted to make sure what's going on. Just, you said 54. He said, yeah, it's actually grown since. And so we said, oh, but can we come talk to you? So I'll never forget going there to talk to him and say, so help us understand. He was running a security services company. So we said, so what's different? There are a whole bunch of these security services companies. What was different about yours, do you think? Oh, he says, I know exactly what was different. I had worked at the local Radisson Hotel, not in security services. I had worked at the local Radisson Hotel in Cape Town. And he says, at the Radisson Hotel, I learned a lot of things. I learned, for instance, how to anticipate customer needs. It turns out the Radisson Hotel in Cape Town and elsewhere this chain has a satisfaction guaranteed or your money back deal, at least at the time it did. And so if you were a staff member at the Radisson, part of the training you got was to anticipate which customers look pissed off. Which customers are likely to complain? Which customers are likely to invoke that guarantee? And you're given training on how to anticipate, how to address, and intervene. And he says, that was a skill I didn't have before. Now, I can anticipate my customers' needs better than those others in the neighborhood. He says, I have my employees showing up drunk. I know what to do because I saw it at the Radisson Hotel. Little things that seem to make a difference. And the point is, there is a strong relationship between healthy, thriving entrepreneurial environments that create hope and prosperity and big business. As you think about, perhaps you wish to chuck your job and become an entrepreneur, or perhaps you're advising your child who doesn't know which way to go. One bit of advice from our research is actually it really helps to have worked at a big company, for better or worse. It really helps to have worked at a big company. Why? Because you understand better how scale works, how you get to trust someone else whose only relationship with you is some employment relationship, and yet you expect that this person will do something. It's quite a magical thing if you think about it. And this is lacking very often in a whole lot of places where entrepreneurs do not know how to trust another. They know this gives you the ability to hire. This gives you the ability it gives you credibility that you wouldn't otherwise have. And that turns out to be a hugely important thing. So just as we rightly celebrate those in the hoodies who create, hopefully, the companies of the future, we must also acknowledge the interconnected nature of all this. And in fact, what we really should be hoping for at the Welsh Assembly or elsewhere is more big companies that could serve as training grounds, as breeding grounds for entrepreneurial companies. These are the kinds of companies that will grow. These are the kinds of companies that will employ others. And when they do that, what will happen is not more entrepreneurship, it's actually less entrepreneurship. More prosperity, but less entrepreneurship. But it also means we will save many, perhaps like Mohammed Bouazizi, who would otherwise be doomed to lives of entrepreneurship and hopelessness. Thank you.